Released in 1982, Pagan Altar's self-released demo tape garnered a cult following that led to excessive bootlegging. 10 years later, the material was going to be given official physical releases, done in the 90s as Volume 1, and then in the 2000s as Judgement of the Dead. It's essential foundational doom metal, obsessed with occult rituals and Black Sabbath records in that order. This band was led by father and son Terry on vocals and Alan on guitar, who publicly called themselves cousins at the time. Pagan Altar's initial run was short-lived, due in part to an expensive theatrical stage show that cost the band a lot of money. Long-running interest in their work inspired a 2000s era reunion and several more officially released albums. Other two new wave of British heavy metal era bands, far to the birth of doom metal, is Witchfinder General, and they took their name from the historical horror film starring Vincent Price. Where their 1982 debut Death Penalty was a cheerfully primitive ode to the substance abuse and cheap sex, the follow-up Friends of Hell delved into the darker side of doom. Death and depression are the overtone for the entire album, making it one of the first to force the mood of what would soon become doom metal. During its short existence, the band was probably best known for topless models on its album covers. One of the first American bands to mellow out enough to fit into the emerging doom genre, Cirith Ungol considered several names from Lord of the Rings before settling on the mountain pass into Mordor. Another important formative doom release. Their second album blends fantasy novel lyrics to crashing riffs, thudding bass, and the vocalist Tim Baker's love it or hate it shriek. Despite the crew production, the compositions are a suitably epic fit for the subject matter, with half of the album's songs topping the 6 minute mark. King of the Dead is altogether a passive and heavier than their more power metal debut, Frost and Fire, and this style accentuates the band's strengths. The debut album by Chicago's Trouble, Psalm 9, is unquestionably a cornerstone of doom metal, contributing to a respectable production and musicianship amongst their early doom peers on its release. Psalm 9 simply crafted on a level that hadn't really been heard outside Black Sabbath's discography. On the surface, Trouble sang about Satan as much did any occult horror metal outfit, but they did so from an explicitly Christian point of view, arousing the terror of eternal damnation using what many Christians would have assumed were the devil's own tools. Had been around the Baltimore, D.C., Virginia area since 1971, releasing only the occasional local single during their first decade. The sole constant was frontman Bobby Liebling, who never changed his Sabbath vision despite countless lineup changes. The material was what would become their debut full length, which was recorded over between 1981 and 1982, and initially released as a self-titled demo tape, then again on a vinyl in remixed, partially re-recorded version. When the Peaceful label on reissued the CD, they restored the Raw 1982 mix and retitled the album Relentless. This is now officially the accepted version. But putting the complex history aside, this is a crucial early American doom by a band so early out of time that they'd been worshipping religiously at Black Sabbath's altar since Master of Reality. The monolith that officially christened doom metal as an official genre still stands as arguably as its single most definitive release. Owners of the deepest catalogues in the genre, Sweden's Candlemass sees the essence of doom metal like few other bands, running up to epic proportions, just like the title Epicus, Doomicus, Metallicus says. It didn't do well upon release, though, and most of its initial lineup, including high session vocalist Johan Langvist, quit afterwards, and there's still a case to be made that the follow-up Nightfall ought to be ought to be as important as well. thanks to the arrival of iconic monk robe singer Messiah McCurlin, arguably the genre's greatest. Named after the lesser known Sabbath track, St. Vitus Dance, St. Vitus debuted the same year as Trouble, with a similarly eccentric sound that put a finger in the face of the local LA scene. This led to their signing by legendary SoCal hardcore label SST, where they spread the sound of early Doom to countless punk fans. St. Vitus hit their full creative peak with the arrival of singer Scott Wino Reinrich, who debuted on their third album, Born Too Late, released in 1986. The most massive piece of Down and Doom that they released, Born Too Late wore its fast-toned 1970s fixations on its sleeve. Its title neatly summed up Doom's, Doom's core sensibility. At the same time, its raw, sludgy sound underlined the band's kinship with punk rockers, often shared bills and even proved influential on the Seattle grunge scene. Wine and Reinrich's original band, The Obsessed, actually recorded its debut release all the way back in 1985, but it wasn't until 1990 that it was released. These early recordings are further evidence of who Weinreich wrote through his 70s on Obsessions, his guitar tone, heavy but warm, updating the sound of blues tinged, blues soaked black metal from the decade earlier. Is it? It's also easier to hear Ozzy Osbourne's inspiration on Weinreich's vocals here than anywhere else in his considerable discography. Once this record was finally out in the world, Wino left St. Vitus and returned to Maryland, DC to restart The Obsessed, who recorded a few more albums with Wino on vocals as well as guitar. He had following sojourns with Spirit Caravan, The Hidden Hand, and again with St. Vitus, and then reunited with Obsessed, who remained his primary vehicle since. Former Napalm Death frontman Lee Dorian did a complete 180 for his next project, Cathedral, which seemingly set out to sound like the most depressing version of Black Sabbath possible. The 1991 debut, Forest of Equilibrium, is a landmark in the evolution of Doom, pointing the way towards a more extreme variant of the style. Dorian's hysterically troubled vocal style here is like unlike any other. Not quite reaching Death Doom territory, but rarely offering much in the way of conventional melody. Meanwhile, his band cruised through a series of plodding, depressive dirges, all but one of which range from 6 to 11 minutes long. Forest of Equilibrium is a one-off in Cathedral's discography, as the band eventually shifted into a warmer, more centric stoner doom hybrid. Dorian has always gone to release significant records by several other doom and stoner bands via his Rise Above label.